The agony of burning alive in a locked basement was my last memory before waking up on the exact day my treacherous sister forced me to marry her insane billionaire fiancé. She had orchestrated my murder to steal my inheritance in my past life. This time around, I will flawlessly play the role of the devoted wife, while ensuring she is the one who goes up in flames. The smell of gasoline and melting plastic was still searing my lungs when I gasped for air. My hands flew to my face, expecting to feel charred skin and blistering heat. Instead, my fingers met smooth, unblemished cheeks. I was sitting upright in a plush, velvet chair in the sun-drenched dressing room of my family's estate on Mercer Island. There was no fire. There was no smoke. "Clara, are you even listening to me?" The voice sliced through my panic like a scalpel. I blinked, my vision adjusting to the bright morning light, and there she was, my older sister, Chloe Ellington, the golden child, the heiress apparent. She was pacing the floor in a silk robe, her flawless face twisted into a mask of theatrical despair. Standing behind her, wringing her hands, was our mother, Beatrice. "You have to do this, Clara," Chloe begged, though her tone held the sharp edge of a command. "You have to put on the veil. Nathaniel Soren is a monster. You've heard the whispers from the country club. They say he tortures his staff, that he lost his mind after the accident. He locked his last physical therapist in a wine cellar for 3 days. I cannot marry him. I won't survive it." I stared at her, the blood roaring in my ears. I knew this day, June 14th, the day of the Soren-Ellington merger. The day my family offered up a bride to the infamous Nathaniel Soren to save our shipping company from bankruptcy. In my past life, this exact scene had played out. I had cried. I had begged our mother not to make me the sacrificial lamb. But Beatrice had looked away, and Chloe had forced the $200,000 custom Vera Wang gown over my head. I had been sent to the Soren estate, absolutely terrified. I had treated Nathaniel like the monster everyone said he was. I flinched when he moved, I locked my bedroom door, and eventually, I ran. I ran right into the arms of Chloe's secret lover, Silas, Nathaniel's charming, snake-eyed cousin. Silas had promised to help me escape. Instead, he used my frantic flight to frame Nathaniel for my kidnapping, seized the Soren proxy votes, and locked me in an abandoned warehouse in Seattle's industrial district. The last thing I saw before the flames consumed me was Chloe, standing safely behind the glass of Silas's Mercedes, wearing my mother's heirloom diamonds, smiling as Silas tossed the match. "Clara," my mother snapped, breaking my reverie. "Your sister is delicate. She has a future in politics, in high society. You've always been a bit of a homebody. You can handle a quiet life out of the public eye. The Soren family has agreed to the substitution as long as the Ellington girl signs the papers." Delicate. The word almost made me laugh out loud. My delicate sister had watched me burn to death. I slowly stood up. The residual phantom pain in my bones solidified into something cold, hard, and sharp. Panic was gone. In its place was a crystalline clarity. If Nathaniel Soren was a monster, then I was a ghost. And ghosts aren't afraid of the dark. "All right," I said softly. Chloe stopped pacing. She blinked, thrown off by my utter lack of resistance. All right? You'll do it? You'll wear the veil?" "I'll marry him," I said, walking toward the sheer, beaded wedding dress hanging in the corner. I reached out, running my fingers over the expensive lace. "But I want the deed to the summer house in Aspen transferred to my name by midnight. And I want Grandma's sapphire necklace." My mother choked on her breath. "Clara, extortion at a time like this?" "Consider it hazard pay," I replied, turning to look them dead in the eye. "You want me to walk into the lion's den so your golden girl can run off with her secrets? Pay up. Or I walk out that door right now, and you can explain to the Soren lawyers why the bride is missing." Chloe glared at me, her mask slipping for a fraction of a second to reveal the vicious, spoiled brat beneath. "Fine," she spat. "Take the house. Take the necklace. Just put on the damn dress." 2 hours later, I was sitting in the back of a blacked-out Maybach, heading toward the secluded Soren estate known as Blackwood Manor. There was no grand ceremony, no walking down the aisle. Nathaniel's condition allegedly made public appearances impossible. We were to sign the marriage certificate in the presence of a judge in his private study. As the iron gates of Blackwood parted, I looked at my reflection in the tinted window. I wasn't the terrified, weeping girl from my first life. I was a woman who had already crawled through hell. Whatever madness Nathaniel Soren possessed, it couldn't possibly be worse than the family I was leaving behind. Blackwood Manor was less of a home and more of a fortress. Built into the jagged cliffs overlooking the stormy Pacific Ocean, it was surrounded by acres of dense, unforgiving pine forest. When the car rolled to a stop, the door was opened by Harrison, Nathaniel's imposing head of security. He was a mountain of a man, a former Navy SEAL with a scar cutting through his left eyebrow. In my previous life, I had been terrified of him. Today, I stepped out of the car, smoothed down the skirt of the heavy Vera Wang gown, and offered him a polite, steady nod. Harrison looked mildly surprised. Miss Ellington, or, I suppose, Mrs. Soren now. The judge is waiting in the library. Lead the way, Harrison, I said calmly. The interior of the manor was suffocatingly dark. Heavy velvet curtains were drawn over the massive arched windows, blocking out the afternoon sun. All the light bulbs were dimmed to a low amber glow. Mr. Soren is having a difficult day, Harrison warned quietly as we approached a heavy set of oak doors. Keep your voice low. Do not make sudden movements. If he tells you to leave the room, you leave immediately. Do you understand? Perfectly, I lied. We entered the library. The judge, a nervous-looking man wiping sweat from his brow, hurriedly pushed the leather-bound registry toward me. I signed Clara Ellington with a steady hand. Where is my husband? I asked. A sudden, violent crash echoed from the back of the room. The judge jumped, nearly dropping his pen. In the shadows near the unlit fireplace, a tall figure was standing over a shattered crystal decanter. Nathaniel Soren. Even shrouded in darkness, his presence was overwhelming. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in a perfectly tailored but rumpled black suit. His dark hair was disheveled, and his breathing was heavy, ragged, like a cornered predator. As he turned toward the dim light, I saw the scars. A terrible, jagged network of burns traced the left side of his jaw and disappeared down his neck into his collar, the remnants of the infamous yacht explosion off the coast of Monaco that had killed his father and supposedly fractured his mind. In my first life, seeing him had sent me into a blind panic. I had backed away, sobbing. This time, I stood perfectly still. They sent the spare. Nathaniel's voice was a low, gravelly rasp that seemed to vibrate the very floorboards. He stepped forward, his piercing ice-blue eyes locking onto mine. There was a dangerous, volatile energy radiating from him. Where is Chloe? Chloe decided she'd rather not be murdered in her sleep by a madman, I said, my voice steady, echoing slightly in the vast room. The judge gasped. Harrison tensed, taking a half-step forward. Nathaniel stopped. A strange, dangerous smirk tugged at the unscarred side of his mouth. And you? You're not afraid of the madman? I've met real monsters, Nathaniel, I said, holding his gaze without a flinch. You just look like a man in pain. I stepped away from the judge, lifted the heavy hem of my dress, and walked right up to him. Up close, I could see the fine tremors in his hands. He was bleeding. A shard of the crystal decanter had sliced open his palm. He had shattered the glass with his bare hand. Without asking permission, I reached out and gently took his bleeding hand. I felt him flinch, a massive, powerful man recoiling from a simple touch. Harrison, I said, not breaking eye contact with Nathaniel, bring me a first aid kit, now. For the next 3 weeks, I dismantled the myth of Nathaniel Soren's insanity piece by piece. He wasn't crazy. He was suffering from severe, untreated, complex PTSD, sensory overload, and blinding survivor's guilt. The yacht explosion hadn't just scarred him physically, it had shattered his nervous system. Bright lights felt like physical blows. Sudden, loud noises triggered violent flashbacks of the blast. The doctors his cousin Silas had hired, specifically a doctor. Richard Aris had been heavily over-medicating him with antipsychotics, turning him into an erratic, volatile ghost in his own home. I fired Dr. Aris on my 4th day. When Silas called the house, outraged, threatening to use his power of attorney to intervene. I hung up on him and had Harrison block his number from the estate's mainframe. I ordered the heavy curtains open just a crack at first, letting natural light filter in slowly. I replaced his terrifying cocktail of pills with a strict, quiet routine. I ate every meal with him in silence. When he had night terrors, waking up screaming and thrashing, I didn't run away like the nurses did. I sat on the edge of his bed, holding his scarred hand, speaking in a low, rhythmic cadence until his breathing matched mine. Slowly, the beast of Blackwood began to realize I was not prey, and I was not a threat. I was his anchor. And as his mind cleared, the brilliant, ruthless billionaire that had built the Soren empire began to wake up. The real test came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting in the conservatory, reading a book, when the heavy oak doors swung open. Harrison stepped in, looking deeply displeased. "Mrs. Soren, you have visitors." Before he could even announce them, Chloe pushed past him, linking arms with Silas. My sister looked radiant in a designer pink tweed suit, her hair perfectly blown out. Silas looked as polished and reptilian as ever, a smug smile playing on his lips. They had come to gloat. They expected to find me a withered, traumatized shell of a woman. They expected to find me begging to go home. "Clara!" Chloe gasped, pressing a manicured hand to her chest with fake sympathy. "Oh, you poor thing. We were so worried. Silas insisted we come check on you. Is he keeping you locked in here?" I slowly closed my book and stood up. I was wearing a simple, elegant emerald green silk dress, but what caught Chloe's eye instantly was the jewelry. Resting against my collarbone was the legendary Soren heart, a flawless 50-carat diamond necklace that had belonged to Nathaniel's mother. It was a piece of jewelry Chloe had openly wept over wanting when she was still engaged to him. Chloe's eyes bulged. Her jaw actually dropped. "I'm perfectly fine, Chloe," I smiled. A genuine predator's smile. "My husband treats me exceedingly well." Silas scoffed, dropping the supportive boyfriend act. "Let's cut the crap, Clara. I know my cousin. The man belongs in a psych ward. We're here to offer you an out. Sign these papers testifying to his mental incompetence, and I'll ensure you get a handsome settlement when I take over the company." He threw a manila folder onto the glass coffee table. Before I could speak, a voice as cold as absolute zero echoed from the doorway. "I think my wife is quite capable of managing her own affairs, Silas." Chloe and Silas spun around. Standing in the doorway, framed by the afternoon sun, was Nathaniel. He wasn't hunched. He wasn't trembling in the shadows. He was dressed in a razor-sharp, bespoke charcoal suit. Every inch the terrifyingly powerful titan of industry he was born to be. His scars only made him look more imposing, more dangerous. He walked into the room, his eyes locked on Silas with murderous intent, but when he reached me, his demeanor shifted entirely. He placed a large, warm hand on the small of my back, pulling me flush against his side. The possessiveness in the gesture was absolute. Chloe stared at the tall, devastatingly handsome billionaire standing before her, then looked at the priceless diamond resting on my chest. I watched the blood drain from her face, replaced instantly by a sickly, twisting green jealousy. She had thrown away a king, thinking he was a monster, and handed him right to me. And I knew, in that exact moment, I was going to drive her completely mad. The silence in the conservatory after Nathaniel's declaration was absolute. Chloe's mouth opened and closed like a dying fish, her eyes darting between the massive, imposing figure of my husband and the multi-million-dollar diamond resting against my skin. Silas, however, recovered his oily composure, though the vein pulsing in his temple betrayed his panic. "Nathaniel," Silas forced a laugh, shoving his hands into his tailored pockets. "It's good to see you on your feet. But let's not pretend this is a miraculous recovery. Dr. Aris made it very clear that your lucid moments are fleeting. You're not fit to run Soren Industries." Nathaniel didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The quiet, lethal calm radiating from him was far more terrifying than any of his previous outbursts. "Dr. Aris is currently facing an investigation by the State Medical Board for overprescribing highly regulated sedatives. A complaint filed by my wife. You'll also find your security clearance to the Sorin Tower has been revoked, Silas. My lawyers, specifically Attorney Prescott, will be in touch regarding the $42 million missing from the European logistics accounts. Silas turned the color of old parchment. You're insane. You have no proof. Get out of my house, Nathaniel said softly, before I ask Harrison to physically throw you off the cliff. They fled. Chloe practically tripped over her designer heels in her haste to escape the suffocating presence of the man she had so casually discarded. Once the heavy front doors slammed shut, the tension in Nathaniel's shoulders finally broke. He leaned heavily against the grand staircase, his breathing ragged. The exertion of playing the ruthless tycoon had drained his fragile stamina. I walked over, slipping my arm around his waist, letting him use me as a crutch. You did perfectly, I murmured, guiding him back toward the quiet sanctuary of the library. He looked down at me, his icy blue eyes searching my face. You knew he was embezzling. You pointed Prescott exactly where to look in the offshore ledgers. How, Clara? How could a woman kept completely isolated by her family know the intricacies of my cousin's shell companies? I settled him into his leather armchair and poured him a glass of water. In my past life, Silas had bragged about his financial crimes while I was locked in that warehouse. He had laid out his entire master plan, confident I would be dead before I could ever repeat it. I pay attention to the things people think I don't see, I answered carefully. I sat on the ottoman at his knees, looking up at his scarred, handsome face. But embezzlement is just the beginning, Nathaniel. Silas didn't just want your money. He wanted you destroyed. I took a deep breath. This was the gamble. You need to have Harrison look into a mechanic named Gregory Trent. He worked at the Monaco Marina the summer your father's yacht exploded. Silas paid off his mortgage a week after the funeral. Nathaniel froze. The glass of water in his hand trembled violently, water sloshing over the rim. The yacht explosion was the epicenter of his trauma, the fire, the scream of his father, the crushing guilt that he had survived while Arthur Sorin perished. Everyone had called it a tragic engine failure. What are you saying? Nathaniel's voice was a harsh, agonizing whisper. I'm saying you aren't crazy because you survived an accident, I said fiercely, gripping his trembling hand. You were driven mad by a murder attempt. Silas blew up that boat, Nathaniel, and we are going to prove it. The transformation in my husband over the next month was breathtaking. Fueled by a cold, righteous fury, the fog of trauma lifted completely. He was a man possessed. He converted the third floor of Blackwood Manor into a war room. Harrison deployed a team of private investigators to Monaco, tracking down Gregory Trent, who had been living luxuriously in a beachfront villa under a fake name. Meanwhile, I played my part. I attended the high society luncheons I had previously avoided. I wore the Sorin jewels, I drank the champagne, and I watched my sister unravel. Chloe was losing her mind. The Ellington Shipping Company was still circling the drain because Nathaniel had halted the promised merger funds pending a financial audit. My mother, Beatrice, was desperately selling off family heirlooms to keep up appearances. Chloe, stripped of her golden future and publicly eclipsed by the sisters she had always treated like dirt, became desperate. She started leaving me frantic voicemails, begging me to transfer the Aspen house back to her, crying that Silas was acting erratic and distant. I ignored every single call. The climax of our silent war arrived on the night of the annual Sorin Foundation Gala, held at the Olympic Fairmont Hotel in downtown Seattle. It was the social event of the decade, mostly because it marked Nathaniel Sorin's first public appearance in 3 years. I wore a custom, backless gown of midnight blue silk that clung to every curve, the Sorin heart diamond resting heavily on my chest. When Nathaniel and I stepped out of the limousine, the flash of paparazzi cameras illuminated the night like lightning. Nathaniel didn't flinch. He walked with a predator's grace, his scarred jaw set proudly, his hand resting possessively on the small of my back. The ballroom was a sea of velvet, diamonds, and whispered gossip. As we descended the grand staircase, the room went dead silent. Everyone had expected to see a broken, shuffling madman. Instead, they saw a king returning to his throne with his queen by his side. Across the room, I spotted them. My elfine Beatrice looked haggard under her heavy makeup. Chloe was wearing a scandalous, blood-red dress, glaring at me with a hatred so toxic it practically radiated across the room. Silas stood beside them, sweating profusely, downing a glass of bourbon. "Showtime," Nathaniel murmured in my ear, his breath sending a shiver down my spine. Halfway through the evening, Chloe made her move. She cornered Nathaniel near the balcony doors while I was seemingly distracted speaking with the mayor. I watched from the corner of my eye as my sister put on a masterful performance. She reached out, touching Nathaniel's arm, her eyes wide and brimming with fake tears. "Nathaniel," she whimpered, loud enough for nearby socialites to hear, "I made a terrible mistake. My mother forced me to give you up. She made Clara take my place because she knew Clara was manipulative enough to secure the merger. But I never stopped loving you. Clara is using you. Silas told me she's planning to have you committed." Nathaniel looked down at Chloe's hand on his arm as if it were a cockroach. "Chloe," he said, his voice carrying effortlessly over the string quartet. The music seemed to falter as people turned to watch. "My wife is the only reason I am standing here tonight. If you ever touch me or speak my wife's name again, I will personally see to it that the Ellington family is reduced to living in a cardboard box under the I-5 overpass." Chloe recoiled as if she had been slapped, her face burning a violent crimson as the surrounding crowd gasped and began to whisper. Before she could form a response, the microphone on the main stage whined with feedback. Silas was standing at the podium, looking desperate and crazed. He knew the walls were closing in. He had planned a hostile boardroom coup for the following morning, and he needed public sentiment on his side tonight. "Ladies and gentlemen," Silas announced, his voice trembling slightly, "I apologize for the interruption, but as acting CEO of Soren Industries, I have a grave announcement. It pains me to say this, but my cousin Nathaniel is not well. His sudden appearance tonight is the result of manipulation by his new wife, Clara Ellington. For the safety of the company, the board will be voting tomorrow to place Nathaniel under an involuntary psychiatric conservatorship." The ballroom erupted into shocked murmurs. Beatrice looked triumphant. Chloe smirked, wiping her fake tears. Nathaniel didn't rush. He slowly walked toward the stage, the crowd parting for him like the Red Sea. He climbed the steps, dwarfing Silas completely. Silas tried to hold his ground, but the sheer, overwhelming intimidation of Nathaniel Soren forced him to take a step back. Nathaniel adjusted the microphone. "My cousin has always had a flair for the dramatic, but unfortunately for him, he is no longer the acting CEO, nor is he an employee of Soren Industries." Nathaniel signaled to the back of the room. The massive projector screen behind the stage flickered to life. Over the past month, independent auditors have uncovered a web of offshore shell companies created by Silas Soren. Nathaniel spoke clearly, his voice echoing in the dead silent room. Documents, bank transfers, and ledgers flashed across the screen. He has embezzled $42 million, but corporate theft is the least of his crimes. The screen changed. It showed a frozen frame of security footage from a Monaco marina dated 3 years ago. It showed Silas handing a thick briefcase to a mechanic. The next slide was a signed, sworn confession from Gregory Trent. "Silas didn't just steal from my company." Nathaniel's voice dropped to a lethal growl. "He planted the C4 explosive on the Odyssey. He murdered my father, Arthur Soren, and attempted to murder me." Chaos exploded. Silas lunged for the edge of the stage, trying to make a run for the service exit, but Harrison and 3 undercover security guards were already there. They slammed Silas to the ground, pinning his arms behind his back just as the ballroom doors burst open. Detective Miller of the Seattle PD marched in with 4 uniformed officers. "Silas Soren, you are under arrest for the murder of Arthur Soren, attempted murder, and corporate fraud," Miller announced, the clink of handcuffs cutting through the screaming crowd. I walked slowly toward my mother and sister. They were frozen in terror, watching their golden ticket, their secret savior, being dragged out of the room in chains. "Clara," Beatrice choked out, her face pale and trembling. "Clara, please. The merger. Without Silas, the merger with Soren is our only hope. You have to talk to your husband." "You're Ellington." "I am a Soren," I corrected her, my voice ice cold. "And there is no merger. While you were busy trying to sell me to a monster, I was busy buying up your debt. I own the Ellington shipping lines now, Mother. I own the Mercer Island estate. I own the cars, the trust funds, and the clothes on your backs. Chloe stared at me, her mind fracturing as the reality of her complete and utter ruin washed over her. The luxurious life she felt entitled to, the man she loved, the wealth she worshipped, all of it, gone in an instant. No, Chloe whispered, her eyes wide and manic. No, 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 this is mine. You stole my life. You're the spare. You're nothing. She let out a blood-curdling shriek and lunged at me, her manicured claws aiming for my face. She didn't even make it halfway. 2 of Nathaniel's security guards caught her by the arms. She thrashed wildly, screaming obscenities, her perfect hair falling in a tangled mess over her face, her designer dress tearing at the seams. Let me go! I'm the heiress. I'm Chloe Ellington. She's a witch. She burned in a fire. I saw her burn, Chloe screamed, absolute madness taking over her eyes. She was hallucinating, her mind unable to cope with the sheer magnitude of her defeat, blurting out the crimes of a past life that no one else could understand. People backed away in horror. Nathaniel came to my side, wrapping a protective arm around my shoulders as we watched my sister completely unravel. Call an ambulance, Nathaniel told the hotel manager calmly. It appears my sister-in-law is having a severe psychotic break. Poetic justice is a beautiful thing. 6 months later, Beatrice Ellington was living in a 2-bedroom apartment in a dreary Seattle suburb, working as a receptionist at a dental clinic just to pay off her remaining legal debts. Silas was denied bail and was awaiting federal trial, facing consecutive life sentences in a maximum security prison. And Chloe? Chloe was committed to the Silver Pines Psychiatric Institute, the exact same high-security, heavily medicated facility that Silas had tried to throw Nathaniel into. I visited her exactly once. She sat in a padded chair, staring blankly at the wall, rocking back and forth, whispering about fire and lost diamonds. I left a single, flawless white rose on her bed and never looked back. I stood on the balcony of Blackwood Manor, the ocean breeze whipping my hair around my face. The heavy, dark curtains of the house were gone, replaced by floor-to-ceiling glass that let the bright, beautiful sunlight pour in. Strong arms wrapped around my waist from behind, pulling me back against a broad, warm chest. Nathaniel pressed a soft kiss to the side of my neck. His scars were still there, but the ghosts that haunted him were gone. He was whole. We were both whole. "What are you thinking about, Mrs. Soren?" he murmured. I leaned back into him, looking out at the endless horizon, the phantom smell of smoke finally, permanently, gone from my memory. Just thinking about how much I love the light, I smiled. If you loved this story of ultimate revenge, rebirth, and taking back control from a toxic family, make sure to hit that like button. Don't forget to share this video with anyone who loves a juicy, dramatic twist, and subscribe to the channel for more insane real-life drama, betrayal, and satisfying karma. Ring the notification bell so you never miss a single story.